Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Advocacy. Tonight, we have the pleasure, of course, of having my co host flying with me, Bunny. And we also have the pleasure of meeting Sherry Epps. I want to just say a quick thing. I met Sherry at the Council for Exceptional Children. It was a conference in Utah, and I was just taken away by Sherry. She spent like an hour with me and my mom at our booth just talking. I was so impressed by Sherry's life that I begged her to be on the show and she agreed. So with that being said, Sherry, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I am a mother, of course. I'm a educator, definite advocate, and I'm also a student, doctoral student. Yeah. Not only I'm also the author of the book series Different but Not Dumb. I wrote this book series specifically because I wanted to children with disabilities to be able to see themselves in the book when reading books, and it's also for parents and educators to get a little more insight on various children with disabilities. Yeah. So every day
What
I'm.
about you, Sherry?
What about me?
Yeah,
Uh,
tell us about
okay.
you, Sherry.
Um, I was born deaf and hard of hearing. Born deaf in my right ear, and a hard of hearing in my left ear. And growing up in school, it was quite difficult. It was quite difficult because I didn't always hear majority of the time what the teachers had to say, and it made a big impact on my grades and my self confidence. So many times I would like try to figure out or decipher what people said. I could always hear their voices, but I could never understand what they said. So I would just smile a lot of times and nod and stuff, but it always drew a barrier between me and friends, and also with teachers, because when I grew up, when you had a disability, you tend to be an outcast. So I didn't have many friends growing up. And teachers didn't always understand because they didn't want to teach a student with a disability. I wasn't in the right setting, if you will. And my mom didn't always quite understand it. I mean, she did what she thought was best at that particular time, but it was always very difficult, definitely difficult for me. And I chose the topic for this broadcast, which says, my son, not only my son, I knew his struggle, and I focused it mainly on my son and myself. The title was I knew his struggle because it was mine, my life, my fight, my son. And I chose that topic because growing up, as I said, being deaf and hard of hearing, I had to navigate through the world, the lens of my entire life. And when I got turned in my mid 30s, my hearing even decreased, and in the which you might say the good ear, my hearing decreased from it went from mild to severe deafness, and so it was it became a struggle not only in my community, but it also became a struggle on my job, and then having a son that was diagnosed with nocturnal seizures. He at the age of 15 months, he had nocturnal seizures, and then when he started school, they diagnosed him with ADHD and dysgraphia. And I had no idea what dysgraphia was. I knew that uh, he could tell me how to do the work, but he couldn't write anything down. His penmanship was maybe this like an infant coming up, trying to just scribble scrabble on a sheet of paper. And still today, even though he's an adult, he still struggles with writing. But it was very difficult in school as a parent because he attended the school I attended when I was a child. And so it was very, very difficult in the schools because they we had teachers that was my teachers. And of course, when you always become a child, you're always a child with adults when you go back home, if you will. And so trying to help him at the same time help myself was a struggle. So that's why I say I knew his struggles. I knew what it was like, but I refused to allow him to go through the same things that I went through. And so I began to fight. I decided, you know what? You got to go back to school. You got to figure out what this is, understand what is it that he has. And they didn't really evaluate him. The school never evaluated him. In fact, once I went back to school, I had a professor who happened to speak in our classroom one day for the speech and language pathologist, and she began to speak, and she started talking about this dysgraphia. And at the end of the session, I'm sitting there and I'm like mesmerized by what this professor was saying. And at the end of the session, I decided that I was going to sit back. Everybody went up to shake her hand, and I'm just sitting back and I'm staring at her, because I was always very quiet. And so as soon as at the end of the session, she looked at me. She knows I'm sitting over there by myself and just looking at her. And she was like, "Baby, are you okay?" And I went up and I started talking to her, and I was asking about this dysgraphia and what did it mean. And she even noticed because I didn't, when she's talking to me, I'm squinching my eyes and I had my head tilted to the side. And she asked me, she was like, "Do you have a hearing problem?" And I'm looking at her. I immediately became like stiff and defensive. And I'm like, "How do you know?" And I'm at the same time, I have an attitude because, like, how dare you say that to me? I was like, I'm up here for my son. I'm not here for you. You don't identify what I have. But anyway, I finally admitted to her, and she was very nice and polite and, caring. And she was like, perhaps you can get a hearing test. And I'm looking at her, because I hadn't had a hearing test since I was a young child in elementary school. But anyway, make a long story short, she said, being that you're a student here, we have a speech and hearing department, and you can actually have a hearing test done. So she agreed to have a hearing test, to process the hearing for me, as well as evaluate my son. And back in that time, to do an evaluation costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So they also did evaluation. That's when I found out that he had dysgraphia. And so I began to really fight. I seek the lawyer, after I seek the lawyer, he was actually placed in a Christian residential school 3 hours away, which was very hard. But I
Sherry,
was
Sherry, let me interrupt just for 1 second, and I'm sorry. So, how old was your
This is a
son
lot.
during this time period?
how old was he? What?
How old was your son at this time?
At this time, when he got diagnosed with dysgraphia, he was actually 6 years old.
Okay,
He was six
okay.
years old when he got diagnosed, but he still was remaining in that school. He didn't get placed into a residential school until he was 8.
And you
So
said it was
Okay,
3 hours away?
3 hours.
hours away. So imagine having your 8-year-old child leave your home and go live in a residential school.
I can't
And what
imagine it.
year was that? What year was that, Sherry?
It was, gosh, now you ask me to think back in math now. Whoa, that was a while, long time ago. He's actually 37 now, I think.
Okay, so 37. So that was 30. So you said he was 8. So that
38,
was 29 years ago. Now you put
29
me on
years.
the spot. Let's do. So, okay, so that was probably in the 90s. That was
Yes,
in the 90s. So,
yes.
okay, let's go back because I mean, while you were talking, I was just like, oh my God, I have so many questions. I can see Bunny did too. But okay, and we have one of our team members. Her son has dysgraphia, and that was the first time I had ever heard of it.
Hmm.
Tell me, how did you identify that your son was dealing with a disability? Because that's not something that's easily diagnosed.
Okay. The way I noticed that, because I had my his teacher at the time was actually my fifth grade teacher. Now, mind you, my son is the youngest. I have two kids. So she was my fifth grade teacher. She was my daughter's fifth grade teacher. And now she became my son's second grade teacher.
I'm sorry. How old is she?
He's 37. So at this time, she became the teacher. You know, she was his teacher. And I'm still like the little Sherry to her. So she's like, Sherry, this doesn't make any sense. He's not writing anything down. He's not doing this, and he's spelling and so and so. So she's fussing. And I would, get with him, and I would notice he would literally take, it might be 9 o'clock in the morning. You know how back in the day you wrote everything from the board? And it was like 9 o'clock in the morning. And at 11 o'clock, he has his name on the paper. That's it. And you're like, hurry up, Nathan, what is wrong with you? I'm writing. And he's constantly telling you he's writing. I'm doing it. And even with the name, you could not understand what it was. And I'm like, what is going on? And even though at home, I would ask him questions, but everything back then was written off the board. And, I'm asking questions and he knew the answers. I could read the work to him and he could tell it even with the math, but he couldn't write anything down. It just wasn't working. And even when he would write, it would take forever for him to write. So that's when I started noticing something isn't right. And so I would ask them to evaluate him. But what the problem was is he was like this little Christian little minister. And he would go around and pray for everybody. And he would sing songs, gospels, and, act like he's a little preacher. And, they were like, oh, he's so cute and he's adorable and he's this and he's that. And I didn't think it was cute because my child couldn't do the work. Yes, he was handsome and talented, and it was cute to see him pray because if you say you got to tell him, you want me to pray for you? And then he just started humming and going in the name of Jesus and all that. But that wasn't, it was cute, but it wasn't cute for me because my child couldn't write anything. And that's when I started noticing the signs, but I still didn't know what it was.
Because some would call that lazy. And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like I'm counting back when you
Mhm.
said this was like 29 years ago. Okay, we 26 and 3. Okay, so that's like 1997-ish.
Yes.
And so even in them days, as we know, it's so many disabilities that's surfacing.
Mhm.
Some would look at that, and that's why I'm asking you that, because even some parents would be like, you just being lazy, you just don't want to
Mhm.
do the work, so some can misconstrue that as lazy when in fact it was an actual disability. So that's when you
Yeah.
have to be really in tune with your child, and you got
Child
to really pay
disability.
attention.
And
Yeah.
I focused it a little more on the seizures. Well, it's because he had seizures, and I thought maybe it had something to do with that. And still today you don't know if it was a fact of that. But I didn't. I had no clue. I didn't know what was going on. And so I would just, until I went to class, and when she started saying the signs and the misspelling the words and how the writing would, and she actually had like a projector and she was showing what it looks like and how long it takes. And I was like, that's what it is. But then when I asked the school, I went back and I asked the school to evaluate him. Oh, give it time. He's cute. He's a little boy. They're a little slower than others, than the girls. He'll catch up, and that's why it went 2 years. But then when the professor told me that I could actually have him evaluated, she said, "You're a student. We'll pay for it." And they paid for the evaluation. And that's when and once they paid for it, she was like, you need to get a lawyer. And I end up getting a lawyer. And I think I just thank God because he made ways. It was actually this lawyer that, and by me working at the school, it was actually this lawyer had another student who went to the school. And this lady, when she walked in the door, everybody in the office walked, because I was in the office. I was working in the office. Everybody was just like scarce because she was just really, really, really nasty. And so once, but I went to the lady, one of the parents that I knew of the child, and I said, "Look, I know that you don't like me. I don't care, but this is about my child." And when she found out it was about my child, then she gave me the lawyer's number. And I think this God, I just know it was God who intervened, who made that happen. And once I got the lawyer, then we started working for the best. And I was able to get assistance for him. The hardest part was letting him go, but I had to make a decision whether, end up suing the school system, but whether I'm going to let him go temporarily so that he can get the help that he need, or was I going to hold on to him because that's my baby. And I wasn't given accolades for doing what decision I made, but at that point it was not long about me. It was about, I know the struggle that I had, and I know how my parents didn't want me to go to Gallaudet because it was frowned upon. You're not normal. So I didn't want him to be in that position. So I'm like, I don't care. You can be mad. You can say whatever you want to, but this is my child, and I'm going to fight for my child. I'm going to make sure that my child gets what he needs. And it was the best decision I ever made. Is he this perfect writer? Absolutely not. But they had tools and computers back then more so than we had, was able to use. But he was able to use those different types of assistive technologies where he could do the writing or speak and do his work rather than having a paper and pencil and write and do the work. So
Sherry,
yeah.
your only option at the time was, because I'm thinking, once he was tested, did the school not have resources to try to help or accommodate him in any type of way? And I know it was back in the 90s. Did the school not have any resources to offer you once you had him tested?
They didn't have, well, not that particular school could not accommodate him. The schools that there was no school that they knew of within the DMV that can accommodate him.
That is so unfortunate.
Um,
Wow.
and so I looked into it. They had some that was a little closer, but they were like, to me, it was like a mental hospital because you had the option to go visit, and it was like these hospital tall buildings, and it was like no. So I chose this school. It was Christian based because I love the Lord, always loved the Lord, and I wanted him to continue to be in church. He was like this little teeny minister. So it was a Christian school. They had colleges, they called them. It was like this huge campus, and they had colleges. So in his college, it was called Grace College. So you had Grace, you had Faith, you had Hope colleges, and it went according to your ages. And then each college had parents, a mom and a dad. And so he had something that he didn't have at home. He didn't have a dad, so he had a mom and a dad there. He got to come home. The first 2 months he couldn't come home, but after that he got to come home every weekend. They put him on Greyhound, came home every weekend if he did what he was supposed to do. So he got to be exposed to stuff that I knew that wasn't going to get exposed to here. He had opportunities that I couldn't give him. So it was a blessing. He went there from 8 years old up until he was 19.
Oh wow, he stayed there the
Yeah.
entire. That was my next question. How
And
long
yeah,
did
he
he
stayed up
stay?
until he was 19, but he still didn't, things would start changing a little bit. with time, you got people change, you got staff change, and uh, I start not liking things that was happening. So I end up transferring him here to down to what part of Virginia is that? Alexandria, and he ended up going to Leary School in Alexandria, is where he graduated with a high school diploma. Because I was determined that was something else he was going to get. My child was not getting the certificate. He was going to get a high school, and it's okay for certain for some children or with certain disabilities. But I knew his abilities, and everybody, God allowed, they grow to a certain level, and I knew his ability. He used to get mad at me because, like, he didn't graduate until he was 21. And he was like, "Mom, I'm 21 and I'm still in school." I said, "If they allow you to stay till you're 40, you're going to school." You know. And I was like, "No, no, no." Because, especially at that age, he started getting, like 17 and 18, smelling themselves and like, "I'm too old to be in high school," and so on. So I don't care. You're gonna do it, because I wanted him to go as far as the Lord allowed him to go,
That's
or he
right.
could go, and I continue to push him. You know, he
And I
learned.
do, I do want to stop here really quick, Shuri, to distinguish. I know we talked about this before, but we may have some new listeners. I want to tell everybody the difference between a certificate and a diploma. The
Mhm.
diploma, of course, is the typical route that most of our neurotypical kids go, where you graduate at 18 and you get the diploma, you walk across the stage. The certificate is something like Morgan, when you don't have, like when you have cognitive disabilities, or you can't go that typical route. You
Mhm.
still stay in, and each state is different. You stay in school to a certain age. I think Michigan is 26, Maryland is 21. Morgan would stay in school until she's 21, and she would not get a diploma, but she would get a certificate. It's a different route. So, like you say, Shuri, I think you have to assess your child's abilities, because sometimes the
Exactly.
school, when they do have a disability, sometimes they push the certificate route. And if you feel as though your child can do the diploma route, I don't think it's anything wrong with you pushing that. It's not, to me, a downfall if they have to go to certificate. But if I felt like Morgan could do the diploma, I would do just the exact same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to stop there to give everybody that didn't
And
know.
I appreciate that. I was
Yeah,
trying to get there.
no, I
Sometimes I can
appreciate it.
continue to go, but
Yeah,
I definitely, and that's what he wanted, he at the time, because he wanted to get out of school.
okay.
And there's days when I had to go at 3 hours and sit with him, and like, "You're gonna do this, you're gonna do that, you're gonna do that," and for parents, any parents who's listening who have a child that with a disability, you know how far, as Paula said, how far your child could go, or how extensive their disability is. So having either or is not a bad thing,
That's right.
but if you know that your child can do, I like that. I push my students every day, um, because I know their ability. If they can go further, I'm going to push them as far as they can go. Don't allow them to be lackadaisical. So, "Oh, well, oh, I'm too old," or I can't do it. If they can do it, then you encourage them to do it, and you push them to do it. And my son, he didn't want to go any further. He thanks me now, you know,
Right.
but he learned that prior to that, he learned a lot of skills. And in fact, now he's a silversmith, so he's actually make jewelry, uh, sterling
Mm,
silver jewelry, gold jewelry, set diamond
mm.
rings, anything, create, design whatever a person wants. So I thank God that he was able to get all those particular skills where he went,
Where
but
was that school at, Shuri? Where was the school?
it
I know
was
you said it's
called,
in.
it's not far from Hagerstown, but it's called Williamsport, Maryland. It was actually 3 hours away.
You've
It's,
heard of it, Bunny?
excuse me?
No, I was asking Bunny. Bunny was shaking her head. And I was
Is
like,
is Pennsylvania or Philadelphia,
It's like right
Williamsport?
on the right on the tip end of Pennsylvania. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
hmm.
yes.
So I
So
do want to go back, Shuri, and I want to talk. I know we've talked a lot about your son, but I also want to talk about your experience. I know the fact that you have endured so much when you were coming up, and again, we're around the same age, so I do know that when we were coming up, a lot of disabilities, it was like either you had, and they used to call them retardation, either you had
Exactly.
that or you were normal. There were no a
In
lot of in
between, none
between, it
whatsoever.
wasn't, you know. And so I know when we talk about you saying how you struggled through school and different things and your parents didn't know much, a lot of it, as we know that most parents did not have options,
Yes.
the way that we have it. And if they did have options, they didn't know about
Right.
it. So I want to talk more about some of the things that when you were in school that you endured and how you would have wanted things to be different.
I would have wanted, for me going to school, when I was a little younger, maybe it's about 20, 30 years ago, I said that I wish I had the opportunity to go to Gallaudet, because at that time I was very much an introvert and I wanted to be feel normal, and I didn't feel like the average person because I couldn't hear. And when you're and I speak about that in one of my books, the autobiography, um, because when you're around the hearing community, they expect you to hear the way they hear, and you say something, and if they say something to you and you can't hear it, it was like, what is wrong with you? You deaf or something? Or they would just say, oh, forget it. I'm not going to repeat myself. And so it was always very difficult, and especially in school as a child, raising your hand. And in one of the books I talk about that, I'm constantly raising my hand. Put your hand down. Put your hand down. I already said it. You don't listen. That's your problem. You don't listen. And so even though I was in the front of the class, because that was the request of my mom, put her in the front of the class. But if a teacher has that back turned and she's talking and writing on the board, you can hear them. Even to the day, you can be sometimes on my right side, I mean on my left side, the side that I can hear some out of, and talking to me, and I still can't hear you. You know. So growing up, it was very, very difficult in school, and especially if students is talking or asking questions and you have more than one child talking, and then you have a teacher's talking, you hear all this gibberish, whole lot of noise, and nothing is making sense. And so that's times when I just sat back and I didn't ask questions and I didn't say anything. And I put whatever on the paper. And of course, it was always wrong because I didn't hear the instructions, and teachers didn't always not. And it was not, I must agree, it wasn't all of them, but 90% of them who didn't have time or refused to take time to explain things. So because I wasn't listening, I remember one year I was in the second grade. I think I was in the second. Yes, I remember I was in the second grade, and it was just October, and the teacher told my mom, "Oh yeah, she's staying back." How could you stay back? Tell me I'm gonna stay back in the second grade. I mean, in October, school only been in a month, in session a month. And did I stay back? Absolutely yes, because I couldn't do the work. I couldn't hear anything. You know, um, the hearing got worse and worse, but I didn't realize how bad my hearing was until I was eligible for a hearing aid. And, you know, I was like, whew, start hearing all these things, everything. I didn't know that. I knew a bird made noise, but I didn't know what the noise was. And the ticking on a still bothers me. The turning signal, I didn't know that thing made sound. Oh my God. I remember when I got my hearing aid and that thing started ticking every 5 minutes. I mean, every second. It drove me crazy. It's so many things, I didn't know you could hear the tires on the street when you're out driving. And I'm driving a car. I was like, oh my God, what is that? That is driving me crazy. And my daughter would tell me, Mom, that's the wheels on the tire. just crazy, just all kinds of things. You don't know what you don't know. And I would tell my friend often, I was like, how do y'all do this every day? Oh my goodness, it's like you got all this noise. So it's times when I would just call myself and I would say, you know what, I'm just gonna go back deaf again. And I would take it out and it's like, oh my God, peace. Whew. It's like quiet, like family. And I still do that some days. I'm like, okay, this is too much. I'm gonna take my E out, you know. But I still wouldn't say much around people. And it wasn't until I became and I've only been a teacher for a few years now. And once I became a teacher, I began to uh, speak up a little bit more about that things that I can hear, and so I tend to make a joke of it now, particularly with the kids. And I feel like I can joke about it, but don't you joke about it, So I would joke with the kids, like sometimes they would talk and talk real soft. I have one student talk, oh my God, speak so low. And then I'll just start moving my lips and nothing coming out. And she'll frown like, what did you say? I say, exactly. So that's the way it feels for me. And then she'll crack up laughing, So now, or I'll say, students, I'm sorry, but I left my ear at home on the dresser and this one is broke. So y'all got to scream at me today. And they get a kick out of it because then they can talk loud. But it was like that growing up. And I would just look and nod at people and smile and have no idea what in the world they're saying. So it was very difficult growing up as a being deaf and hard.
Okay.
I do have a question, Sherry. I want to go back just a tad bit when you were in school. So my
Mhm.
question while you were in school, how did you learn, um, when teachers did not, recognize your hard of hearing and things like that? How were you able to learn? And then how old were you when you got your hearing aids?
I didn't learn.
Mm.
So
Some passed me on.
you went through the
I did not.
entire school
In elementary, in middle school, I got D's and F's.
and they just passed you along.
They passed me along. I was quiet. Um, there's some teachers who I might, especially in high school, you had like 7 classes. I
Mhm.
might have had two who understood and will work with me, but still there was, because by that time because there was such a big gap of learning. um it was so much I didn't know, so much I didn't get. And so I didn't there was D's and F's. How do you know how to do something if you ain't heard or catch the lesson? So what I did here I got D's and F's,
It's
and
a
I
wonder
didn't
they did
realize.
not. It's a wonder that because I know back then they did not recognize a lot of the disabilities, but they did have that one classroom that they just threw all the children that were different, all the special education children.
See, but that's the thing.
They put them all in the same classroom around the back of the school. So did they
I
not
wasn't in
have?
special ed. I was not in special ed.
So
I
you
was,
were in that in between. You were in that gap because you
I was in,
weren't
yeah,
disabled, but you had a disability.
yes. And
There
I
was no
took
in
speech and
between.
hearing through elementary school. I didn't know what it was about. I remember going to speech and hearing. I liked the lady very much. I remember going to speech and hearing at my middle school for 1 year. But then at the second year, I ended up my 8th grade year and ninth grade year, I spent at home because I had surgery, knee surgery. But I didn't get none of those foundations, not until my first year of college. Um, how I got in college, only the good Lord knows.
I just was about to say, how were
Um,
you able to get into
you know
college?
how you have connections? And my mom had some connections with her supervisor, and I got into college.
So did they
And
make any accommodations for you in college?
No, because the idea of me having to even mention that I had a hearing disability wasn't even mentioned. But uh, that's why I say God has walked with me all my life. In college, my first year of college, dear friend of mine now noticed that I had some abilities, and she was determined. She said, "You coming to my classroom, my English professor, my office every day from 4 to 5, Monday to Friday." I was made. She would grab me by my shoulder and come to her room, her office, and she worked with me 5 days a week for an hour. And my grades got up to a C. And then, I got grown and had kids. But anyway, I didn't start making grades and getting the grades that I get now, because I am a student, until I started my master's degree. And that's when I started
Wow.
really realizing that, wow, Sherry, you know, hmm,
You're
that
really
first
smart,
B
huh?
was like awesome.
Yeah. So you were in the DC public schools or Maryland?
I was in DC
DC
public
DC
schools,
public schools?
just
Wow.
passed on.
But I want to ask, is your mom still alive today?
Yeah, she is.
Why
Thank God.
why didn't she get you the help that you needed? Did she it was it just frowned upon, or did she just not know?
I think she didn't know. I
Mm.
explained that to a teacher the other day. Parents can't give you what they don't know, or what they haven't been, they don't
So I'm
have.
sure when you went home, when you would say, "Mom, I can't hear," I can't. When you say like, okay, say you get home and you be like, "I can't hear, Mom. I can't hear the lesson. I keep getting the bad grades because I can't hear them talking." What did she say?
That wasn't always a priority. She knew that, but
Okay.
I don't know. It wasn't. I don't
Mhm.
know. I can't explain that.
Okay.
She gave the best that she
Mhm.
could,
Yeah.
at that time, and it was what it
Wow.
And
was.
that's why I thank God for platforms like this,
Yeah.
Yes.
because we're bringing awareness to resources and help for parents, that there may still be some parents out there that just
Mhm.
don't know
Yeah, they just
their
don't know.
child are dealing with some sort of
Disability.
inability or disability. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
and somebody else responded and said it was a different time, and I agree. I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
during that time, again, when we were in school, and I go back to elementary, I go back to junior high, we have a lot of adults that have disabilities that have
Yep.
never been dealt with over time, even the writing disorder. That's why I asked you that, because there were some people that writing was terrible,
Mhm.
or because they didn't write, but they were labeled as lazy. It was just
Mhm.
so many different disabilities out there. What's the other one? Dyslexia. When we were at the CEC, they said even though that's more common now, they're still hard to diagnose that. I mean, it's
Exactly.
really hard. So I think when someone said it's a different time, and they said parents they didn't really know about advocating at that time. And
Yes.
they're right, because most of the time in our neighborhood schools, you got what you got. Everybody got the same books, everybody got the same lesson. And parents just didn't know.
We didn't know. So
Nope.
many people are undiagnosed right now today. So those children that should have been diagnosed to get help then, they grew up to be adults undiagnosed, and they had children that possibly are undiagnosed as well.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that's what, it was. I could ask my mom questions all day, but I think about it, and I appreciate what she did. I never went hungry. I always had clothes. I was
Yeah.
fed.
Hmm.
She was the best mom. I saw every holidays, and like time now, Christmas. I mean, Easter and stuff. I mean, it wasn't anything that I lacked, but
That was
she
the priority back then.
was.
Parents,
And,
they
but
took
when
care
it
of the
came to
families.
That
Hmm.
the
was like
education,
you
she
say,
sent
that was the
you to school.
priority.
You was
Hmm.
gonna go to school,
That's right.
and you're gonna respect those people. And if the teacher said you yelled or you were blue, then you were blue, whatever that
That's
teacher
right.
said. And so,
But
that's
the
what she
Lord got
gave
you
me,
what
and
you
I can't,
needed.
I can't knock her,
That's
because
Yeah.
right.
she did the best that she could do,
I
and
think that sometimes, again, like you say, even with your son with the tests, I think when they presented those amounts to parents too, and when the
Mhm,
parents thought about the like the process of okay, so if she's deaf, okay, can I afford a hearing aid? Can and
mhm,
then when they start bringing the test your way, oh yeah, if they get tested for this, this is what it costs. So parents are like, listen, I'm just doing the best that I can, and
yeah,
Mhm.
this is why you say money is just so important. But most parents don't know that these schools, and again, I don't know what it was like back in the day, but these schools have a responsibility
Yeah,
mhm.
today is
to these
different.
individuals. Yes, and was IEP, was it an IEP in process back
That's
in
what I
those
was
days?
thinking.
Sure.
Was it any type
I
of
don't think it was any of those things back
documentation
then.
back then?
No, it was nothing back then. So you just went along with the process, and
And it's still like that even today, being that I'm a special education teacher. And, I have parents who are in the same situation. They don't know. And I'm always advocating, even with my teachers, I'm like, a parent can't give you what they don't have.
that's right.
And you can't blame them, but it's our job as educators to educate them and
Mhm.
to help
Absolutely.
them. I've been in IEP meetings, where even when I started being a special education teacher and had to do the IEPs, uh, copy and paste this and do this and do that. And I didn't always know, but being that parent in that place, and I'm looking at the expression of the other parents' faces, and I'm like, wait a minute, do you understand that? And I will go A, B, C, D on them
Yeah.
because I wanted them to feel comfortable. Because sometimes we can get so busy saying all these big words and not realizing, they don't know. And they're going to say yes, yes, and going to sign that paper because they trust you to to do right by their child,
Mhm.
and they don't, if they don't know it, and they're not going to let you know that they don't know it because they don't want to see ignorant, and they always feel less than, if you will, than what you call educators. So a lot of times they don't explain it, but I've always make sure that I explain as much as I can, and I tell them, if you don't understand it or if it's something you need to know, come to me and we'll learn together. You know,
I love
That's
that.
a
but
blessing.
it's not always done that way.
Yeah.
You've sat and walked in the shoes of being someone with a disability,
Hmm.
having a child with a disability, and now you are in the position of being a special educator to help parents
Hmm.
navigate all of that.
Exactly.
So you are definitely a blessing, and your story is definitely one that should be told because you're a testament of,
Hmm.
where you are today and where your son is today and your children. So
Yeah.
it's a blessing.
And one thing that I will say is at the CEC, of course, we stood and we talked for some time with Sherry. And I will say, I did tell her I was going to tell her on the show, but I was just so inspired by Sherry. Number one, I don't have a disability. I was one of those parents that nodded their head and that signed those forms without really understanding. I was one of those parents. And years later, you realize that you were being set up for a fail, and it was
Mhm.
heartbreaking because for me, you know I felt like I failed my daughter, but I felt like at the same time, like your mother, I was trying to do the best for her that I knew
Mhm.
how. But when Sherry told me that in order for her to be a better advocate for her son, she went back to school, I came home and I told my husband and my son that I think I'm going back to school.
Oh,
Awesome.
Yeah,
good.
I'm going to find the time. And my husband was like, that was a great thing. But Sherry, you inspired me. You inspire me. Even though Morgan is about to graduate in June, I still feel like that whole process is still like I don't have the full process down. And for me, of course, advocacy is one way that I want to do it, but I also feel like there's a missing component. I want to
Mhm.
learn. I never was able to learn from the ground level. I didn't. By the time that my aunt came in and helped me to sue the school system to get Morgan out. Morgan was 14. So I felt like, gosh, I just jumped from base one to base 10. And I really never understood that whole process, but it was like a big span of time that I missed.
Yeah.
And I think that, where I am now is a great place, but I feel like I needed to go back to the beginning and
Maybe
understand
to
that
the second
entire
floor,
process.
not to the basement. Maybe start at the second floor because you got
Yeah.
the basics. Start at the second
Yeah.
floor.
I was so inspired by Sherry. I came home and I told him, I said, not only did she go back, but she went back for her master's. And I was like,
That's awesome.
yeah, it was awesome because, like you say, because your mom, which our parents back then, whose parent could just say, I'm going back to school? You had mouths to
Yeah.
feed.
Exactly. And that's what I
Mm.
did. I had mouths to feed. And, even with my master's, now that I have it, I start noticing that you have so many kids. And it's not just the special education kids, it's all the kids, with the social emotional issues, that impacts them, because nowadays this is a different era. These kids, they
Post
really,
COVID is different. Post
yes,
COVID
Yeah.
life is
yes.
different.
And so many of them having, difficulty in school, educationally, emotionally, physically, so I like, even though I can help them educationally wise, how can I help them emotionally so that they can get the education they need? And so that's why I'm in school for my doctorates, because I want to be even as much as help I can, not only for the students but for the parents specifically.
Wow, that's
So
awesome. And I do want to take some time to, I want to show your books. I want to
okay.
show your series of books. Can you talk about those books? And I want to show people what you have done with what what you've been given.
Okay. So I start writing these particular books, different but not done. And if you notice, the word different is spelled with the phonetic E is going backwards,
I love
because
it. I
it
love it.
it emphasizes and it highlights, okay, yes, I'm different, but that doesn't clarify me to be less than, or says that I'm dumb or I'm incapable of succeeding at whatever the good Lord want me to succeed at. So I named, that's the title, why the title came from. But then I started off with Spectrum, take a ride on the spectrum, and because I encountered one particular student who was autistic, and I wanted to learn more about autism, and this particular child was amazement to me because I couldn't figure this child out. And so I talk about this particular child, and I had two children that was on the spectrum, totally different. One was very sensitive to music and noise, anything, and touch. And the other one didn't show too much physical disability, but when it came to academics, because one was very high on the spectrum, could do the work, but couldn't, social skills was off. And then the other one was more of a physical thing in academics. So that's what take a ride on the spectrum is about. I have Tilted Head, and that is based the child version. I have two books, but that is the child version of me growing up deaf and hard of hearing and being in the classroom. If you see here on the one that's a little look like a moon, that is the adult version of Tilted Head. It's called Between Worlds, because the sound of silence. And I wrote that particular book because oftentimes I felt like I was living in between worlds, because the hearing community expected me to hear like they did, and the deaf community would not accept me because I wasn't totally deaf. You know.
Mm.
Then you have 0 to 100 is a student with ADHD. My son also had ADHD, and then I work with several students who's very hyper. And 1 minute they calm, the next minute they could be up on a ledge somewhere. And so that's with 0 to 100 about. Not shy is about a student that has selective mutism. I had a foster cousin who was selective mute, and because of trauma in the home. And now I teach a student that's selective mute, and that's usually a child who can speak but does not speak outside of the home majority of the time. And I have a child that's offbeat, and that story is based on my son's life, who has dysgraphia. And yeah, so it is based mostly on his variety, his and my it also talks about my experience, the experience coming from the parents' point of view. Clouded is talk about a child that's visually impaired. I've worked with a student who could see, but the vision was very, very clouded, and the parent refused to buy the student glasses because it didn't look good. So as you can see, I have 6 different series, and again, they're based on my life experiences with students, my personal life, and my life as a parent with my son. So,
and I will say that as the team sees, you can purchase these books on Amazon.com or Books A Million. I definitely want to purchase these books. I told her I'm excited to read them because, again, for me, I want to show that, that for me, I want to know that these people are here and I want to learn more about them.
yeah. And also, if you go on my website on Different But Not Dumb, it's actually DIF dash RENT DMB. You can get it'll give you a synopsis of each one of the books, because sometimes you might say, well, I'm not sure which one I want, so it will give you a synopsis if you decide to only pick 1 or 2 of the books. It also gives you a videotape of some of different pages within the book. For instance, the child that has 0 to 100, I actually work with a student where 1 minute he was sitting down in the cafeteria, the next minute he was actually swinging from the hedge of the door sill. So it shows you what it's like and how I felt at that particular time. I wonder if that was being a teacher is really what God wanted me to do, working with that child. But it just
see any other books coming?
Excuse me?
Do you see any other books coming that you want to tell us about, like something else that, I'm trying to think of what you haven't really spoken about. Like, I know you say from an emotional standpoint, have you dealt with that in a book?
ED, emotional disturbance.
Yeah.
Yes, one of the books is on this child with emotional disturbance. I'm trying to remember which one. I think that's the one. Not shy is actually emotional disturbance. The child with that's selective mutism. And I put not shy because they most of the time, if you see a child that doesn't say anything or shove them or hide behind the parent, they consider that, oh, she's just shy, and it's actually the child is not being shy. They call it selective mutism, and that actually is under special education is identified as an emotional disturbance, because it's due to anxiety. So yeah, so that's what that one is about. And at one time they did identify my son as having ED as well. I didn't agree with that, but emotional disturbance.
Okay.
But at the time, I didn't know any better. And eventually, that's what one of his first diagnosis was, far as the school system is concerned. And they found out eventually that it was dysgraphia. But a lot of that stuff stems from when a child does become emotional, their behavior becomes outrage when they realize they of age and they realize that they don't mount up to their classmates, and they become a problem. And back in that time, a lot of children were so-called ED because they became problems. They're going to get attention, whether it's positive or negative. And so if you act out or you become the class clown, back then you had an emotional problem, but it wasn't emotional. it was, it to a certain degree, because I can't do this, so I'm gonna get some attention. I'm gonna act up, and I'm gonna be the class clown, or I'm gonna be bad, or I'm gonna fight, and it
Mhm.
became that's what one of his first diagnoses. But eventually they found out it wasn't. It was triggered by his lack or inability to write. So
How was your son socially growing up, like with his siblings? How was he socially?
it was okay. They have a love hate, like any other sibling, love hate relationship. My daughter loves her brother to death, and if I say anything about him, you leave my fat boy alone. She called him her fat boy, but she can fuss about him. They have their own personal relationship, but it wasn't. It was never like a bad issue. It was the average sibling rivalry.
Okay.
Yeah. He was jealous of her and she was jealous of him, you know. So they had, they were kids, you know. But being having friends and stuff, he never had too many problems with having friends, yeah, in the neighborhood.
Well, I mean, this has been awesome. I mean, this has been great. I think we've covered everything. We talked about you. We talked about your son. We talked about you as a mother, as an educator, as an advocate, as a student. Sherry, what haven't you done? But you've done, I tell you this, you've come a long way. No one would have ever known that, your foundation, you did not get, the tools you needed to continue on with your education. So that's what inspired me. If you could do it, then I should definitely be able to
Exactly. God
do it.
shows no respect to person. If you
He
choose
does
to
not. But
better
I just,
yourself, the
yeah.
opportunities are there. Take advantage of it.
Yeah, so I just want to commend you and I appreciate you. And like I told Sherry offline, it was a couple of people that really got really good. I mean, when I talked to them, I was like, wow, just I was so inspired. And Sherry was one of the numbers that I got. And I was like, we've got to stay in touch. And it just so happened she grew up in the area that I grew up in. My sister went to HD Woodson. We went to Easton. I mean, we were grew up in around the same area. So I just want to just tell you thank you first and foremost for agreeing and accepting the invitation to be on the show and just to come on and tell us your story because your story, whether you know it or not, is very powerful. It is. And it is just it's encouraging at the same time. And I just appreciate you telling us how and my someone else said yes you did. Yes, you did. Yeah, my sister she went to HD. So of course she wants to applaud that, but power of the tower power, whatever. But
Yes,
yes,
yes.
but just keep. I just thank the Lord for using you in so many different ways through your books and everything, even being able to help your parents. It's just such a blessing. And I'm glad we got to meet each other. And I will be ordering your books today. I will. And I'm looking forward to reading them. So I know those are my closing remarks. I'm going to give Bunny a chance to say something and then we have to wrap it up. Sherry, you can close us out.
Well, Sherry, it has been a pleasure meeting you. I see in the private chat you've got your supporters there.
Yes.
They've been putting comments and in the private chat, but it has been an absolute pleasure meeting you, hearing your story, and I love the way that you spelled different. I
Yes.
love that
Hmm.
because no matter what disability you have, we're all different. So
Yes.
I
Exactly.
really love that. Different but not dumb.
Yes.
That is so powerful.
Yes.
Powerful. I love that. I really
Mhm.
love that. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. God bless you. And the fact that you are a special educator, I know that the parents and the students that come in your classroom, they will be blessed because you're going to take the time to make sure that they have all the tools that they need. So thank you and God bless you.
Thank you as well. And thanks a lot for inviting me, having me on your podcast. It has been a true blessing. I take this as the beginning of something big. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. So for those that joined us again, please join us for another episode of Advocacy on next Thursday. Again, we appreciate Sherry taking the time to come on here. And if you Sherry, can you put in there in the chat, can you put it in your website? You can go onto Sherry's website and you can purchase those books. And just let's support. Let's go out and support her in her endeavors to be an author. She's done some great jobs, and I definitely want to even read the adult book where you feel like you're in between worlds. That's powerful to me. I definitely want to read those books. So those that can, please go on and support her. And we definitely will see you all next week for another episode of Advocacy. Again, everyone have a great Easter, the resurrection. We don't say Easter as much, but resurrection. Please have a wonderful resurrection this weekend, and we will see you next Thursday. Bye
Okay.
bye, everyone.